Hello. In the Crown of Aragon 639 years ago, it was April 14th, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Molt Cara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. Let's begin today's document. Today's document is from the Secret Seal Register of Joan, and it is quite an interesting piece. It is continuing the story of a certain Berenguer de Vilaragut in Valencia. The last time that Joan wrote about Berenguer de Vilaragut, it was on April 8th, and we looked at that document on that day in the podcast. And that document was addressed to a group of lawyers who Joan was telling, you'd better get moving on capturing and prosecuting Berenguer de Vilaragut. And today, it's about, how many days later? 6 days later, about a week later, Joan is writing to the Governor of Valencia. And it's a very long letter. It's like an unusually long letter for this kind of thing, it seems. And Joan is basically giving the Governor of Valencia a lesson in how criminal justice operates. It's really interesting. And remember, the first time we saw something about this Berenguer de Vilaragut, a troublemaker in Valencia, it was a letter from Violante to the Governor of Valencia. So Joan at this moment is basically repeating something that Violante had sent about a month earlier. Now, what Violante had written to the Governor of Valencia was a short letter just saying, go capture this guy and his followers. Violante had somehow been made aware that Berenguer de Vilaragut was causing problems and just said to the governor, go get him. And that was pretty much it. Oh, and it mentioned that he had followers. So how was the severity of the trouble that Berenguer de Vilaragut was causing? We do not know from that letter from Violante. But what we do know is that Violante's will was not followed. That something happened, maybe Berenguer de Vilaragut proved to be a rather wily person, or maybe he had some kind of understanding with the Governor of Valencia. It's all very murky. What is clear from today's document is that what Berenguer de Vilaragut is doing at this moment on April 14th is he is playing off different jurisdictions against each other. The beginning of today's document is Joan saying that he has learned what's going on. He has learned that Berenguer de Vilaragut is using the authority of the city of Valencia, something like the municipal government, in order to obstruct whatever effort was being made, maybe those lawyers decided to get it into gear and had attempted to capture Berenguer de Vilaragut, and then the municipal authorities of Valencia confronted them and said, "You're not taking this guy." And then maybe those lawyers wrote to Joan. It would kind of make sense. It's kind of like enough time for all of that to transpire, and then for the mail delivery to bring Joan a letter. Okay, then what Joan goes on to say to the governor of Valencia is that, well, we really have to get this guy into custody, and you have to do it. But Joan spells out a certain rationale here. It's actually kind of funny when you read it. On line 8, you will find the verb en matar. And this is where the AI was actually really helpful, because it sorted out that this word means execution. Faire en matar, to make executed. And the whole phrase that these two words are contained in is one that begins on line 7. And the whole meaning of it put together is something that it would have really taken me a while to figure out. First of all, because I would not have been sure that abbreviation for en matar is for an M. And if you go to the dictionary and just try to look up en matar, you're not going to find anything. It's basically unofficial kind of way of saying, to make executed, en matar, faire en matar. It's like 3 words, but the preposition en has been appended onto the verb. So that whole thing, I don't honestly know if I would have been able to figure out without the AI help. Yesterday's episode had a document where the OpenClaw pipeline just failed. It did not provide me with anything useful, and I actually had to replicate my older process in order to get some help with understanding the document. Today, though, I opened up that automated transcription, and it really worked like a charm. And it drew my attention to this particular moment in the document, and then another one, which that one I think I would have recognized on my own, but I got there so much faster because I had this AI generated transcription to save me a ton of time. All right, well, that's a little segue about the AI help. Now, let's talk about this whole phrase that I think, let's see, it actually might even begin, where would this phrase begin? It's a very long phrase. It maybe even begins on line 6. Let's start in the middle of line 6. E per com seguent a los nostres qui en la justicia faidora d'aquests que tenim ací, persones no podem bonament ni deguda faire en matar sens affrontaments certs quis han a faire de necessitat. All right, what all of that basically amounts to is the following. We are not able to justly and rightly execute somebody without formal judicial proceedings that must be done according to our jurisdiction. So what Joan is writing here is that the apprehension of Berenguer de Vilaragut is required before he can be killed, which logically makes sense. But it's like, how are you going to kill someone if you don't have him in your possession? But what I think it also means is it's not legal to just go send out an assassin. It's not legal to go say, okay, bailiff, you have orders, shoot to kill. You can't do that. And Joan is, not willing to go into extra legal behavior here. He is explaining to the governor what I'm pretty sure the governor already knows, which is that in order to kill Berenguer de Vilaragut legally, he first has to be captured, and there has to be some kind of judicial proceeding. The governor obviously would know that. I mean, how do you get to be a governor of a big place like Valencia without understanding how criminal justice goes? But then, Joan, for some reason, finds it necessary to explain all this. And not only that, he goes on and on and on in multiple different rephrasings that are just, including all of the different adjectives for bad things in this vague description of what Berenguer de Vilaragut has done. And it's really amazing how many words are deployed in this document without actually saying what Berenguer de Vilaragut did. We have the malwestats and detestables crimes. We have the circumstances. We have all these different... it's just... We have the word fet and Ankara, all these different vague terms that are just listed out here, and there's not one specific. So it's a really interesting convention, I think, that you don't spell out details of what happened. I think there's something to be said here about what are the responsibilities in the criminal justice process at this high level of the monarch, that he's not gonna get into the nitty-gritty. And we see this actually in all of these documents that we've been looking at, where they're just not cool with saying specifically what happened, which is just maddening for the historian, isn't it? Where it's like, I just want to know, what did this guy do? We do have one other phrase, though, that I have not seen before in any of the documents that I've looked at. I'm sure it occurs every now and then, but it's the first time I've seen it in a document from Joan or Violante. And it's in line 18. It's the fourth and third words from the end of the line. Lèse-majesté. This is a reference to a phrase, lèse-majesté. And that phrase actually is one that has had a remarkable continuity from ancient Roman times all the way up until the present. There's a nice little Wikipedia page about it. It's a certainly incomplete Wikipedia page, but I'll link to it in the show notes on the webpage for today's episode. And basically, lèse-majesté is a phrase that roughly translates to insulting the monarch. It's a particular category of crime that is basically at the level of treason. But it's about speech. It's about the criminalizing of certain speech acts that serve to diminish the stature or the authority of the monarch. And so it seems that Berenguer de Vilaragut has been speaking ill about Joan, maybe about Violante, or it is possible that the lèse-majesté that's mentioned here is actually describing behavior that Berenguer de Vilaragut has amassed, some kind of force, a group of people who have decided to simply disobey. It could really be either of those things, but I do just want to observe that the inclusion of this phrase, whereas like we've seen like, you know, crimes against the fisc, we've seen different kinds of other phrases that are, you know, contra nostra persona is actually in the same line here. But this is like adding something. It's adding something, and I feel like Joan would not have added it if it didn't have some kind of relation to something that Berenguer de Vilaragut was saying. I think it has to do with speech as well as behavior. That's just what I am guessing at this point, just because the phrase is so unusual. It seems to me that it's probably not deployed that often. For what it's worth, I can tell you that in the bulk data that was generated through the automatic text recognition, you know, as best as it could be done for the 6 registers that I put through the OpenClaw pipeline, it does appear, after I've done some keyword searching, different kinds of spellings, that this is the only document in those 6 registers that includes the phrase lèse-majesté. Now, it could appear in Latin in some other document. I need to see if I can do a search for that. But just the fact that this is the only Catalan occurrence is, I think, an interesting one that speaks to its uncommon appearance that I had kind of had a sense for just anecdotally. All right. I will say that there is on the next folio in this register another document about Berenguer de Vilaragut. It is dated April 15th. We are actually going to be looking at a different document for tomorrow's because it's a little bit more interesting. But what I will say about the next folio in this register is that Joan, the next day, writes directly to the city of Valencia, writes to some kind of bureau in the municipal government of the city of Valencia called the judiciary, the criminal judiciary. It's actually, the addressee is Justitem in Criminali of Civitatis Valenciam. So I will put in the webpage for this episode that other folio so you can look at how Joan then contacts the city of Valencia in order to say, you'd better release this person to the governor and you've got to stop shielding him. It'll be interesting to see if Berenguer de Vilaragut comes up even more in the rest of this year. And also, let's not forget that Joan is at some point going to fall severely ill in the upcoming 10 to 15 days. When in these documents can we see Joan? We can definitely see him when he's angry, when he makes these threats of, using extreme terror if he doesn't get compliance. Can we see Joan here in today's document? Would one of the counselors or would one of the high-up scribes feel comfortable writing a document like this? Or is it really only Joan's influence that would take the governor of Valencia through a lesson in criminal law? My feeling is that we can see Joan here in this document, that Joan is taking an active role, that he's not outsourcing this to one of his trusted advisors, his chamberlain or somebody like that, that he is his chancellor or something like that. He's doing this. I think he is taking an active role in deciding that this is going to be a long letter to the governor of Valencia. You can almost see the emotionality coming through, his irritation that compliance has been delayed, and that this Berenguer de Vilaragut is flouting the will of the monarchs, is escaping the punishment. Well, you can kind of understand from Berenguer de Villaragut's point of view that he would not want to be captured, because I think he knows that his end is near, that he's on the run, that once he is apprehended, then whatever kind of judicial proceeding transpires is going to result in his execution, just, like this document says. So from, Berenguer de Villaragut's perspective, he is definitely trying to be wily, and he's trying to get away. We'll see if he succeeds. It's almost like when you're looking at this situation in these documents from the perspective of Berenguer de Vilaragut, no news is bad news. Because if we never see it coming up in the document again, it probably means that Joan and Violante got some kind of letter saying, yep, we got him, he had his proceeding, he's been executed. And then they wouldn't need to write anything. They wouldn't need to write back, good job, Governor of Valencia. I don't think they do that. I think they're only writing when there's a problem. I mean, for the most part, to these subordinates. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt cara compagnona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, I've done my job. Because remember, the motto of The Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm very dissatisfied that in all of this text, this big long document, just don't really get a sense of what Berenguer de Vilaragut was doing. Goodness. Anyway, visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes. And listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care.